Hi, I'm Paul King, one of the co-founders of Flow Mobile Surveying, and I'm here today with Paul Scurrah from That Branding Company. Paul, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, Paul Scurrah from That Branding Company. Been in a number of years. I help businesses develop their brand strategy and brand identity, and also build websites and help with graphic design and things like that.
And you do a lot of work with the Flow team, and I'm always leaning on you for design help. Could you tell me a bit more about the kind of work you do with us?
Yeah, so I get involved in some of the kind of bigger internal reports, like annual reports on state of the asbestos industry, things like that. But my biggest interaction with you guys is developing custom cover pages for your clients. So clients that join the team or join your service can have a bespoke, custom, professionally designed cover to match their business.
So why would someone do that? Why would someone have a bespoke cover page for their business?
Ultimately, it's to look that bit more professional. For the bigger businesses, they might already have a brand identity established, and having a cover page which matches all that just seals the deal in terms of how professional they look. And for smaller businesses, it could be that they've not necessarily got an established brand yet. So having a custom or professionally designed cover page helps it be that much more real. And so looking professional in an industry that's quite rich in a lot of companies that do surveying, a professional design cover can make them really stand out.
And what makes a good cover page? So you've seen, I think you've designed over 120 at this point. What, in your opinion, makes a good cover page?
So a number of things. So for instance, a nice clear logo somewhere on the page, nice and bold, so you can see exactly who it is providing the cover or providing the report out to a client. And as long as there's a lot of space to be able to see some of the content, it doesn't have to be necessarily very detailed. The cover page itself, in fact, should probably be kind of not necessarily sparse, but just doesn't have to have a lot of stuff in there. The details inside the report. So as long as the cover page kind of matches the brand and matches the company details nicely, perhaps includes their details somewhere on the page as well, a nice clear title, and then maybe a little bit about the customer that they're working with. It's more about, for me in terms of designing, it's more about making sure that the style and the design matches the company more than anything. But as long as it's nice and clear and it's really obvious who the company is that's whose cover page it is, it should look really professional from there.
And what if someone has like no idea what they want, which you and I have both seen. Some people, they just don't know. Yeah, they don't know what they want, or maybe they're just starting out and they don't have any brand at all. How do you guide them to the promised land, that ultimate cover page?
Yeah, so a lot of the clients are new to their own businesses, so they might have worked for bigger companies before and decided to branch out for themselves. And so they might only have a logo by itself. I think most people would think, okay, if I'm going to set up my own business, I need a logo. So yeah, it is one aspect of brand, but it is often the first thing they get, and then that's it. That's all they've got. And so without that kind of extra information about what else should we include, are there illustrations, are there shapes that we should use, what fonts and styles should we use? A lot of people don't have that to start with. So yeah, designed over 120 so far, and we've got a big gallery full of these now. So what I tend to do is to say, are there cover pages in this gallery which kind of resonate with you, that particularly stand out and that you enjoy and you like, that you could, if it had your logo on there, it would work well for you and you'd be pleased to be able to pass that to a client. And that really provides a kind of starting point. What I don't like to do is just copy cover pages, but having a look through the gallery and seeing what the designs are possible, because the actual what's possible in terms of design is really, really vast. So yeah, having a look through the gallery, if there are a few that kind of resonate and look really good, we use that as a starting point, and then it'll be a case of changing the colours, maybe the layout slightly, but at least is that kind of starting point where they're involved in the process of deciding what that cover page looks like.
And you touched a bit on there about the design process. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? What is, from start to finish, what's the design process look like?
So for the people that want a cover page or that are offered it, you obviously introduce the client to myself, and then I can ask a series of questions. So I ask the kind of same questions to everybody because I don't know what position they're at in terms of, or what stage they're at in terms of brand and brand identity. So typically I'll be asking for, have you got a logo a good version of your logo, because the clearer it is, the nicer it'll look on your final report. Did you have any particular fonts that you like to use, any colors that you like to use, any patterns or illustrations that you end up using on, if you've got other reports, we can make use of those things. Or social media, so a lot of people don't necessarily have an idea of what a cover page looks like or reporting to refer to, but they've got a lot of social media which is kind of quite tied into a brand. So that becomes a really good reference point for me. And yeah, from there, sometimes I get zip files with a dozen or so different types of logo in there, which is also very useful if that's what people have, because different styles of logo kind of lends themselves to different styles of cover page. So I ask all the questions, I get some feedback. I then generate maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 different cover page styles. I think depending on the actual client, a client with a more established brand and clearer guidelines on what their brand identity is, actually makes it easier for a designer to create a lot more variations of cover page, because you know the rules and the boundaries of what you can do with design. I think for companies where there's not a lot to go on, it's a bit harder to generate something. I mean, you can obviously just create hundreds of different things with nothing, but when there's nothing, you kind of sometimes struggle to design something. But that's where the gallery can come in and help with some kind of, at least a baseline. But 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 different designs go back, and then there's a decision on whether 1 or 2 really resonate with them. And if required or if wanted, we can tweak 1 or 2. So I might like the way it's laid out at the top part on this one, but I prefer the bottom one on this one. So we'll combine them. And that process can go through 2 or 3 different stages and go back and forth a few times. There's been clients with multiple variations, and sometimes it actually goes back to an early design as well. But they're really involved in that process to decide, what they really like. And eventually we'll land on a design that we say, yep, that's the final design, that's what I want, and then fine, well, that's one we'll build then.
Nice. And once that design's been chosen, what next? What happens then? Is it you just take that design and put it straight on the report?
Oh, absolutely not. So designing is actually done outside the Flow system entirely. I use my own software for that. But it's actually got to be built in HTML and CSS. So it's got to work with the Flow software itself and work with the app. And so we use HTML and CSS to actually take the design and code it up. And so I use a test environment, but I use an area of Flow to actually code the cover page up so that all the right things fit into the right place on essentially what looks like a web page that's A4 shape. So I design it as A4 because ultimately when you print it, it will be A4. But then I'll actually create HTML and CSS to code it up and make it look like the design. And hopefully it's pretty much exactly as designed. Sometimes there's a slight variation, but yeah, it's actually going to be built. And then eventually we pass it back to the team to make it live for clients.
That was going to be my next question. Does the design always look like the finished build, the finished product on the app?
I try as best to make it identical. It can be hard. The software I use for design you can create kind of infinite scale drawings and infinite scale variations of things that it's not necessarily pixel perfect. So and there are limitations on perhaps placing things on top of each other and creating things like masking, where you've got a particular shape that you want something to be put into a picture to be put into a particular shape. It can be hard to kind of get that in exactly the right place that was designed. So more often than not, you probably wouldn't notice that it's slightly different, but it's obviously close enough that we can pretty much match the design.
A designer would notice though. One pixel out and you would notice.
Designers notice everything.
I've seen how tiny your resolution is on your monitor.
It's tiny. It is tiny, but it's. I think it helps just be that much more accurate with stuff. So I do like to make sure that the actual design they get that's going to go to a client matches what they wanted in the first place. So when we've agreed something and that is the design, I try and match as best as possible exactly that with the code side as well. But that takes time to do, and 90% of it can be done quite quickly, and then a little 5% or 5% of design can actually take up 50% of kind of coding time. So, but no, I like to make sure that the final version that gets downloaded and sent to a client will match what was originally agreed.
It's the same in my world. The last 5% takes 50% of the time. So roughly, and I know it's quite a hard question to answer, how long typically does it take from start to finish to create a cover page?
So there's probably two kind of timeframes we're talking about. One is the physical length of time it takes me to do some design work and then do some build work. But then there's also a calendar time of, how long does it take in terms of interactions? If the more keen a company is, the quicker it can be in terms of delivery. But in terms of physical time it takes me to do some design work and do some build work, it depends slightly. Some of the design aspect can be 1 or 2 hours to create a few different variations. And then the coding side can take anywhere between 1 and 3 or 4 hours sometimes, depending how complex these cover pages can get, and they can get quite complex. But yeah, so something very quick can be a couple of hours, start to finish. Others can take up to a day, depending how complex they are.
So what would you say are the advantages or the pros of having a custom cover page for a small company versus a big established company?
So in terms of the more established companies, it's more than likely there's going to be some sort of clear identity that they want to match and stick with anyway. I think the larger the company, the more they realize the power of branding and how important it is to a company. So they've probably got reports or presentations and social media established that they want to tie in together with. If you're going to use the best software in the industry, you might as well have a cover page which then matches all the other things that you have in place already. So it works really well for them that they get this as a service. For the smaller companies, like I say, some of these people maybe have worked for other asbestos companies to start with and decide to branch out by themselves, which is great. And I think they obviously start by thinking, I'm going to need a logo. Well, that's a good starting point for sure, but they've got nothing else, so they don't know what their social media might look like or what a website might look like. So the cover page process, because they can see the kind of options and variety of things that's available to them, once they've been involved in that process and we land on a cover page design, they can take that and develop their social media from the back of that and their website. Indeed, I've had clients come through with exactly that problem, and I've gone on to help develop their social media and website as well.
Awesome. So you're saying that actually kickstarts the branding process for a lot of these smaller companies?
For some of the smaller ones, it really does. Yeah, I've probably had half a dozen companies come through and say, well, whilst we're at it then, do you also do this and do you also do that? So yeah, we can do social media and all the other graphics and build your website in the back of this. So yeah, it's been really good.
That's awesome. I was thinking before we came into the interview that there's probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of your designs out in the wild on our clients' cover pages. How does that make you feel?
It gives me a sense of pride. It really does. I mean, I know you've got clients where there's 50, 100 people working for the company, some really big companies, and knowing that all these reports get kicked out with the work that I've produced on there, it feels really good, really good. And I'm glad to be able to offer the service.
Do you find this work rewarding, Paul? Obviously, you've done branding and web design for quite a long time, but the cover pages, I would struggle to say how long we've been doing that. Maybe a couple of years now, a year, or just over a year.
Working with you guys, a couple of years now. Yeah, I do. I mean, and I'm learning things all the time. So whenever I get to the starting point of cover pages, it's actually not necessarily hard, but because I've designed so many now, I know there's things that I also want to avoid. So there's, I want to, because I don't want everyone's cover page to be identical, actually coming up with new and intuitive way or different ways of creating a cover page which makes sure it's definitely different from everybody else's is that little more challenging and therefore rewarding as well. So, it's been really good.
Awesome. What have you learned working on these cover pages the last year or so? Has it challenged you as a designer or your coding skills?
Yeah, you touched on coding skills. On the design side, yeah, there's like I say, this trying to think of designs which are definitely different to everybody else's. That's a challenging thing, because essentially it's like creating, if every customer that's come through has say 4 designs, that's nearly 500 cover pages designed, of which over 120 have gone on to be built. So 500 designs of one cover page to get 500 different designs every time, it is quite challenging. So I like that side of things. And from a coding side, it's actually benefited me in terms of There are things that you can do with coding which I can then employ on the design side as well. So I say masking is definitely one of them. So being able to create custom shapes for instance, this site photo that normally goes on the front. If you want that contained within a specific shape, that's now absolutely fine. That's something I've learned. So some of the early designs were always kind of just a rectangle or a square site photo. Being able to mask that kind of opens up a whole new door of potential options for cover pages. So, you know, continual learning on this, on the kind of coding side has actually helped on the design side as well.
I got some of the cover pages printed off for our office wall, and they've been framed and everything like that.
Brilliant.
I want to send you some for your next birthday, I think. Put them on your wall.
Super. Looking forward to it.
So, yep, what's next? Have you got some sort of future designs you've got in mind, or have you got some sort of more challenging things you want to sort of try and achieve with these cover pages? Or is it all about just finding something that's unique and right for the client?
First and foremost is about getting something good for the client. I have seen some technical aspects in terms of the coding side, which I'm intrigued as to how that might play out on the design side. So knowing what's possible on the, just exploring what might be possible on the coding side, I'm looking forward to seeing how that might play out on the design side as well. Just to see, what extra kind of layouts and styles might be, that I can kind of pull into some of those designs. Yeah, look forward to that.
Brilliant. And we've, as you know, we've started moving into new industries now. So we started in asbestos. We're now going into, well, we've got several clients in the HVAC industry, but also fire safety now as well. Mm-hmm. So how do you think that's going to affect the different designs you do? Are you excited for us to start moving into some of those industries so you can start doing some different kinds of designs?
It does. I mean, as well as the design side, it's also interesting just the people involved. Like all the clients I've ever interacted with have all been absolutely fantastic. Really good people to kind of interact with. But yeah, in terms of how it alters the design side, I think because you guys are growing, which is fantastic, you start to take on a lot more, or what I've noticed anyway, you start to take on a lot more kind of larger companies, which again helps me on the design side because they've usually got a more established brand that I can work with as well. So, I like that aspect of it because, like I say, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but the more rules you got in place to kind of hem in what a brand identity should look like, that actually helps me in terms of design. So my creative juices can get flowing. I can create loads and loads of designs. I really enjoy it. Actually, I've been meaning to ask you a question, which is, you obviously bring me in to help with the design process because that's my key process. I'm a designer. So, but why do you offer this as a service to your clients?
So when we started out, I think a lot of our clients, they wanted this fancy looking report. But as you sort of alluded to before, if you're starting out, you tend not to have many assets. You may have a logo, you may not even. And it was quite hard to deliver on that sometimes. David and I are both web developers, as you know, but I'm certainly not a designer. And my brother, actually, he's a bit of a unicorn, I suppose. He's the fabled designer developer. You don't get a lot of them around, but he's wrapped up in other work. So to be able to deliver on that handsome looking cover page was actually quite hard. So we wanted to give everyone that unique, fancy reports for their clients, but actually with the skills that we had were available to us at the time, we just couldn't do that. So we brought you in to basically fill the gaps in the business. And I mean, it speaks for itself. Obviously, we get incredible feedback on the people's reports and on the cover pages. And I think it actually makes someone's business feel real if they're just starting out and all of a sudden you've got this fancy looking report and your client's giving you great feedback on it. So that was why we did it. We wanted to offer that service and give someone something they could be really proud of. Yes, that's why we brought you in.
Really pleased to be part of the process and help you guys out. And like I said before, just knowing all these different designs are out there and being utilised, it feels really good as well. I've never had feedback from David though.
Yeah, he's a bit of a dark horse, isn't he? He does love him. He tells me he loves him.
Good. Well, if he's prepared to put him on the office wall, then I'm happy.
So thanks so much for the interview today, Paul. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see more of your amazing cover pages in the future.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.